thankful for you to join us. We know it's kind of complicated tonight. Some people having some internet issues with the fires, but we're really excited. So I want to say welcome to the 2022 Dr. Carol Grizzard Browning Lecture in Religious Studies. We've been doing this now for, I don't know, maybe 9-10 years. And we want to honor Carol, who was a dynamic professor of whoever has just written on the screen. There you go. If you could not, that would be awesome. Let's talk again about Carol Grizzard Browning. She's a professor emeritus of religion at Upike. She served as an advisor to our academic team and really was a scholar professor. Her expertise was in 1st and 2nd Samuel. She wrote the notes in the New Interpreter Study Bible, which if you swing over by the chapel, we have a copy of that study Bible. You can look at Carol's notes. And she taught at Upike for 23 years before she retired. And one of her students said this: as genuine a person and teacher as I've ever met, Carol's always shared something special with her students. She shared herself. It was clear each time she lectured that she taught from her heart. Her passion for the subject and for students was unquestioned. Inside and outside the classroom, Dr. Grizzard sincerely expressed interest in her students. And this student says, I personally benefited from her caring spirit, words of wisdom and encouragement. And I'm just really excited about our guest tonight, one that Carol would absolutely love and be really excited about. And without further ado, let us introduce our speaker tonight, Reverend Dr. Angela Williams Gorrell. Helps people and teams at top organizations have deep, life-changing experiences. She speaks and writes about joy, meaning, finding the life worth living in the intersection of spiritual and mental health. She's taught at several schools, including Yale and Baylor, and Fuller and McCormick Seminary. Media sources such as New York Times, NPR, and Christianity Today have highlighted her research. Angela is a consultant and a thought leader for numerous organizations, including the U.S. Army, Yale Center for Faith and Culture, and Luther Seminary, the Faith Plus Lead platform. She utilizes her experience to help create collaborative communities of prevention, specifically working to lower suicide and addiction rates.
All right, so what are we taking notes on now?
How about you ask those questions?
Huh?
If you can please mute yourself. There you go. Before I go any further, I guess I'll go over this. If you can only use the chat box and the chat option, we don't want to interrupt our guest, and we don't want to interrupt her thoughts. So, well, as I was saying, for the last 14 years of ministry experience, Angela is ordained in the Mennonite Church USA. She is an author of Always On, Practicing Faith in a New Media Landscape, and her newest book, The Gravity of Joy, a story of being lost and found. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram. Angela and her sister, Steph, co-host the Grief Sisters podcast and the Grief Sisters support group on Facebook. You can learn more about her work together, or their work together, on griefsource.org. You may feel lonely, but you're not alone. And without further ado, Angela, the floor is yours. We're so thankful for you. I'll stop sharing this so you can pull yours up. A big welcome back virtually to Pikeville, and we wish we could hug you and see you in person, but this is the second best option, so welcome to Pikeville again.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get my slides going here for that very generous introduction, for this invitation to be here tonight. I'm going to enlarge that a bit. How does that look, Dr. Music? It looks good for you. Can you hear? I don't know if I can't hear you, but hopefully it looks good.
I had unmuted myself. It looks great. I'm sorry. It looks wonderful.
Okay, perfect. So first, for anyone who doesn't know me, if you haven't read The Gravity of Joy, you may not know, probably don't know that I was born in Eastern Kentucky. I grew up in Pikeville. So it is a really, really special thing for me to be speaking with you tonight. It brings me so much joy. I mean, honestly, it's a little bit like I've been on the verge of tears this whole week, because you'll see as this lecture unfolds that this is Pikeville is a very special place to me. It's where I spent the first 8 years of my life. And it's where a lot of my story comes from. And then it's integrally tied to the work that I do now, because my dad lived and died in Pikeville. He died there about almost 6 years ago in January. And so not too far from where the university is. And so Pikeville has a very special place in my heart. And so does all of Eastern Kentucky and the state of Kentucky. And so I'm so overjoyed to be with you tonight and to be sharing a little bit of my story and my reflections that have come from living this story. Dr. Music, I don't know if you're able to mute the people coming on or not, because I want to lead everyone in a guided meditation, and it will be a distraction to hear the dinging.
100%. I was just texting somebody. I don't know how to do that. Can you walk me through that real quick? I am so sorry.
Oh no, I know.
If you click on like participants, a little arrow beside it, it should give you the option to turn the ding off with the host. Does that work?
Okay, let me see here. Yes, okay. I think I just did that. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just want everyone to be able to concentrate. So we're not hearing it anymore. So I don't know.
It should be good now.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so first, just wanted to tell you, I'm so excited to be talking to you tonight. And I hope that you feel a little bit of that love that I have for Pikeville as I talk tonight. And so I'd first like to start, like I said, with a guided meditation. And this is just a way of entering into a kind of dialogue between us and just centering ourselves. I know you've had a long day. You've like been through a lot of different things. You're at the end of your day. And so I'd love to invite you first to just close your eyes wherever you are, if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, maybe just try to soften your gaze, like find a point on the floor and soften your gaze. And if you could, try to see if you can get more comfortable than you already are. Like, how comfortable can you get? You know, maybe for you, that means getting cross-legged in the seat that you're in, or putting your feet flat on the floor, making sure your back is supported. And now see, like, can you even get like 10% more comfortable? Now I invite you to take 2 breaths in and 4 breaths out. 1, 2, in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Try it again. A couple breaths in. 1, 2, and 4 breaths out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Try again. A couple breaths in. 1, 2, and out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now try to take 3 breaths in and 6 breaths out. 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again. 1, 2, 3, and out. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now try to take the deepest breath that you've taken all day. And now I invite you in this time to try to imagine someone sitting across from you right now who has loved you deeply. Imagine someone sitting across from you who has loved you to life. They could be someone who's died, someone who's still living, could be God. Who has loved you? Imagine that they're sitting across from you. Try to imagine what they look like tonight, what their face is like, how they're looking at you. Now imagine that they take your hands into theirs and they look at you with the comfort and encouragement that only they can. And imagine that they're saying words to you tonight that you really need to hear. What do you need to hear from this person who has loved you? Now I invite you to thank them for their words, for the ways that they have loved you to life. And now I invite you to give them a hug or a kiss, maybe both, and tell them that you'll see them later. Now think about the way your back feels against whatever you're sitting on, maybe the heaviness of your legs. Wiggle your toes and fingers. And you can open your eyes and come gently back into the space that you're sitting in. Since you're sitting here breathing, like we just breathe, we all breathed together. Since you're sitting here breathing, your story is still being written. Your life is worth living. I want to be very clear about that tonight. Your life is worth living. You may be feeling any number of weighty things as you sit here in the room that you're in or watching this tonight. Perhaps you're feeling the weight of the news of the last few years, the weight of having been scandalized by life. I mean, for many of us, all of us, the shades have been lifted and the suffering of the world is so palpable that it's impossible to ignore. And often it's very difficult to see the good. Perhaps you're feeling the weight of mistakes, the weight of stress, of juggling too much all at the same time, the weight of depression, of anxiety. Maybe it's the weight of the past or the weight of the future. Perhaps you just feel the weight of the mundane. Maybe you feel a sort of like sense of stunted existence, that life is passing you by, but you're uncertain if any of it truly has value. Maybe you feel like you're doing, and lately you're like, to what end? Richard Rohr once said these words: a focus on progress, and more concretely on science, reason, and technological advancement, has made us powerful and effective, but also ravaged in the most important areas of our humanity. The inner world of meaning has not been fed. Tonight is an invitation to reflect on suffering inside you, beyond you, perhaps both, and to also nurture your inner world of meaning. And then to think about what this could look like in your relationships with others, how to nurture their inner worlds of meaning. It's a movement from the inside out. I hope you're with me. Tonight is an invitation, good. Tonight is an invitation for you to take a deep breath and to reflect on your life, what it means to God, to the world, to others, to you. If you wanted a guide who was reflected on suffering and the life worth living from a comfortable recliner, I'm really afraid that you have come to the wrong lecture. I have not come to the conclusions that I have tonight from a comfortable recliner. In March of 2016, I was hired to work on the Theology of Joy and the Good Life Project at Yale University. And I was ecstatic. I was so excited to be investigating joy for my job. I was just like, I mean, is there a better job than this? I don't know. I don't know if there is. Like, I was super excited about it, right? And I spent the first 8 months just reading everything I could get my hands on about joy. And then 8 months later, 8 months into the project was 3 years long. 8 months into the project, 3 of my family members died in 4 weeks. One of my family members died at 30 by suicide. 2 weeks later, my nephew, Mason, died at 22 of sudden cardiac arrest. He had an unknown heart condition. And my nephew's funeral was on a Saturday, and that following Thursday, my dad died after about 12 years of opioid use. And he died there at the medical center in downtown Pikeville, and I was there with him for the last 5 hours of his life. My book, The Gravity of Joy, it's about this time period in my life of profound grief. And just as I was trying to live into a new season of my life and preparing for this book to be released, the pandemic hit. Shortly afterward, I got divorced. Since those painful weeks of losing 3 family members 5 years ago, I've had 3 other people close to me die. My grandma, my memo, my former pastor, and the former manager of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture during the Joy Project, Phil Love, died just 2 weeks ago. I know about suffering. I know about pain. I know about paralyzing fear, blinding rage, and crying all over journal pages and into couch cushions. I know about laying in the floor in a fetal position, begging for God to do something, anything for life to feel more bearable. For 1.5 years following my dad's death, I lived in the fog of grief. And then I surrendered to a very strange invitation. I became a volunteer chaplain at a women's maximum security prison. During the first month of visits to the prison, I learned that our team primarily served the women in the mental health ward and the women on suicide watch. And the overwhelming majority of women in the Bible study, and this is the case in prisons all across the United States, were serving time because of an addiction to heroin or crack cocaine. The building that we served is largely a mental health hospital and a sober house, but it's inside of a prison. I remember thinking how peculiar and remarkable it was that after everything that I had gone through, I was regularly learning from women who deal with significant depression, anxiety, addiction, suicidal thoughts, many of whom had lost their children, like my oldest sister, Steph, and at young ages. In prison, my research on joy and my personal weeks of hell, my family suffering and these women suffering, it all collided. And I could barely contain the passionate blaze that was set in my soul. For months after my dad's death, after those 4 weeks of hell, as I call them, right? For months, I had begun to wonder, does our work matter? Is joy trivial, shallow in a world that is suffering? And then suddenly being with these women in this prison and realizing how their suffering intersected with my family's suffering and the greater suffering of the world caused me to ask, like, what does joy have to say to this? Is there something here for joy to do in the midst of all of this suffering? I knew that opioids and suicide were killing people at alarming rates, especially in Eastern Kentucky and in this region of the world, right? And I suddenly wondered how these forms of death might be related, not just in my own life, not just in the women's lives at the prison, but also in the fuller picture of what was happening in the United States. And so I began doggedly reading about and reflecting on the surge in opioid use and in suicide. As it turns out, heroin users are much more likely to die by suicide than others, 7 times more likely. And of course, there is more to the story. After doing a lot of research and reflection, including interviewing others who had loved ones who had died by suicide and addiction, it became more and more important for me to help people to understand that overdose and suicide are not moral failures. Overdose and suicide are not moral failures. Instead, they are demonstrations of pain that have led to despair. Both death by suicide and death by overdose have been called deaths of despair. Despair is an awful teacher, an indiscriminate parasite which feeds off of our grief, anger, fear, self-doubt, self-hatred. In short, despair feeds off of our pain. Addiction and suicidal thinking are sourced in unexamined, unlamented, and untreated pain that leads to more woundedness and spirals of self-destruction. As I reflect on the different experiences that have been shared with me about suicidal thinking and addiction, several sources of pain are prominent, okay? Abuse and neglect, perceived failure, a lack of control, financial stress, as well as overwhelming feelings of shame, inadequacy, and worthlessness. These sources of pain often nurture a sense of loneliness in us. We can begin to feel like, whether it's true, like real or imagined, that we are alone in our pain and that no one empathizes with us, no one has compassion for us. Like, we can see other people, but they can't see us. We can see people every day, but we can't connect with them. Johann Hari has said, the opposite of addiction is connection. Hari has argued that addiction is a social disorder. There are 3 things that come together and make it possible for someone to die by suicide. And this sense of loneliness, this lack of connection is one of them. And I'm using this language very intentionally tonight, die by suicide. Saying died by suicide demonstrates more understanding than saying someone committed suicide. Died by suicide creates space for compassion and for the pain that the person was experiencing. And so I really encourage you as leaders now and well into the future, please encourage others to use this language, and please use it as you talk about suicide so that we can create more compassion and understanding for what's actually happening in someone's mind when they die by suicide. And so there are three things, what I'm saying is that addiction and suicidal thinking are connected, right? And so addiction is the opposite of connection. That's one thing I'm saying. Now I would like to move on to talking about Thomas Joyner's book, Why People Die by Suicide. He says there's three factors, three things that come together that make it possible for someone to die by suicide. And the first is this sense of loneliness that I was just talking about. The individual no longer feels that they belong to a valued social group, or what has been called failed belongingness. Every human being, no matter our age or any other difference that we might have, has an unceasing need for deep attachment, intimate love, and the desire to be chosen. And when we don't feel like that we're chosen or that we're loved or we're attached to other people, it causes profound loneliness. And this is one of the main factors that contributes to suicidal thinking. A second factor is the developed ability over time to harm oneself. And this can come through a number of factors: time spent in prison, in the military, doing activities that kind of put you on at really high risk that are really dangerous. And basically anything, abuse or neglect in your past, anything that lessens your fear or your horror of death is one of the factors. And so it's just what Joyner realized is that people who have this sort of history that makes it feel like to them that death is less and less scary, or less and less, something to be horrified by, the more likely they are to die by suicide or to harm themselves. And so a history of self-harm over time can do this as well. And for people who are abused in domestic violence situations, child abuse, any number of different kinds of abuse, suicide can start to look like relief to them from the life that they're living. And so they're actually less fearful of death than life, because life is so difficult and painful. And the third factor that comes together is the sense that that the person's life has become a burden on other people. Like their life doesn't matter anymore, that it's lost its sense of meaning, of direction, of purpose. And oftentimes what I see is in the research and in people's stories about suicide is that there was a sense that they had failed in some way, failed to live the life that they were meant to live, made a massive mistake that people were going to find out about, and had an identity crisis and didn't think that they could recover from failure. And so their life lost its meaning and direction in that way. And so those are the three things: failed belongingness, failed meaning, and this history that makes it like death seem less horrifying and scary. In short, deaths of despair they're sourced in illnesses of the soul, unlamented pain, uncultivated belonging, and unhinged identity. Deaths of despair begin with illnesses of the soul, these three, right? So some of the symptoms of an unwell soul are apathy, rage, depression, anxiety, and burnout. And I'm sure I'm saying that tonight, and you're all like, some of you are like, okay, you're describing my soul. Yes, some of the symptoms of an unwell soul are apathy, rage, depression, anxiety, and burnout. Tending to illnesses of the soul is not simply the work of mental health workers. Not only are there not enough mental health workers to handle all of the unlimited pain, uncultivated belonging, and unhinged identity that is out in the world, that so many of us experience, illnesses of the soul require more than a few months of therapy to heal. Now, don't get me wrong. Therapy has been life-changing for me. Huge therapy advocate, okay? I had a therapist who helped me maintain a relationship with my dad after I realized he was struggling with addiction a number of years ago. I had EMDR therapy after my 4 weeks of hell so I could live wholeheartedly again. And I'm currently in trauma therapy, trying to heal from a couple of different issues that have happened recently and throughout my life. Therapy is incredibly helpful, but it's not enough for the illnesses of the soul that I'm describing. Tonight, I'm asking you to be the kind of leader, the kind of human that invest in the health of the souls of people around you and the health of your own soul. We cannot simply respond to crisis after crisis. We cannot rely solely on people in helping professions, God bless them, to assist once the symptoms show up. Apathy, rage, depression, anxiety, and burnout, right? They are the people, they attend, once the symptoms show up, help people in helping professions attend to them. I'm saying we need to stop it before that happens. We are in desperate need of what I like to call, invest in the health of souls. Yes, we are in desperate need of collaborative communities of prevention. Now, collaborative communities of prevention, what are they like doing? That's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to spend the bulk of our time focusing on that. Collaborative communities of prevention that prevent the spread of our most contagious illnesses of the soul are marked by three things: empathy, belonging, and joy. In many ways, this lecture is a gentle reminder that the things we often underestimate, the things that we take for granted, are precisely those things that sustain us on the days when life breaks our heart and feed our inner worlds of meaning. These three things right here, these are three of the most important things that feed our inner worlds of meaning. These are the things that sustain us on the days that life breaks our hearts. A collaborative community of prevention is first marked by empathy. So I'm encouraging you tonight, embody empathy. How do you do that? What does that look like? I have a few ideas, okay? Know the pains of the people around you. What keeps them awake at night? What has broken their heart? Most of us have an ache for and an ache because of. Mine for the aches in the people that you lead, that you work with, that you are friends with, that are in your family. Mine for the ache for and the ache because of. And then create space in your circle of the world for these pains to be openly lamented. Be a compassionate witness to your people's pain. Lamenting with others in person and online can be wildly simple and yet profoundly impactful. Laments, it can be on social media, through messages, it can be through DMs, through text, through phone calls, and in person, on Zoom. Laments can sound like this: what happened is cosmically unfair. I can imagine why that experience was gut-wrenching. That sounds horrifying. I can understand why you're angry. This is definitely unjust. That's like a punch in the gut. And even more simply, I lament with you. I mourn that this happened. This includes being willing to model lament, be willing to share what breaks your heart and what keeps you awake at night, and explain why. The more human that you are with others, the more human they will be with you. In research about work environments with toxicity versus trust, empathy emerged as a huge factor in building trust. Trust is essential for collaboration. I encourage you to create space in your groups for embodying empathy, specifically through lamenting with others. Pastor and theologian Howard Thurman describes how hate happens in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. He also writes in this book about love. Like, how does love happen? Drawing on his writing tonight, I'm suggesting, I'd like to kind of trace how love happens. I'm suggesting that if you work to have empathy for people that you encounter regularly, you're more likely to identify with them, if only with their humanness. If you can identify with someone, you can learn to have compassion for them. And if you can have compassion for them, you're more likely to listen to them. And if you can listen with all of you, with your whole heart, mind, and soul to the people around you, you're more likely to truly see them and love them. What we need are people, humans, who love others deeply, who love people to life. The kind of love developed through understanding and empathy promotes belonging. And that is the next marking of a collaborative community of prevention of suicide and addiction and other illness, and the illnesses of the soul, right? Belonging. I think that belonging is a lot like sleep. Track with me here, okay? So sleep, we usually don't ask each other how well we are sleeping. You know, that's not a common thing. Like, let's have a conversation about your sleep. If you're not sleeping well, you might bring it up to like someone that you live with or something. But in everyday interactions, in classrooms, at work, with like, you know, regular friends, you're not like, so tell me about your sleep life, you know? And yet it's essential for well-being. We just sort of assume everyone's getting enough sleep. But most of us, as it is with belonging, right? We don't really ask a lot about belonging. We just sort of assume that everyone's sort of getting what they need. But just like sleep, most of us need more of it. And perhaps more importantly, we need a better quality of sleep. And similarly, we need a better quality of belonging. Pretty much all of us. There are lots of ways to intentionally cultivate belonging. First, I think we just need to talk about it more. I think we need to use the word more. We need to say things like, I want you to feel a sense of belonging on this team. And I hope you feel like you belong in this group. And then we need to ask each other regularly about belonging in the communities that we're a part of. You know, we can ask very intentionally, do you feel like you belong at this company? Do you feel like you belong on this team, in this group? What do you think belonging is? How can we promote belonging more this semester? What can I do to help you feel like you belong here? Next, I think that we need to be more present to one another. Really see each other. Sometimes we need the eyes and the mouths of other people to remember that we are actually still here. In other words, we need people who genuinely look at us and sincerely say to us, it is good to see you today. It is good to see you today. Like, I'm glad you're here. You matter to me. Your presence in this place, it's a gift. This means starting group meetings or coffee or lunch conversations or the class or the program, whatever you're doing, it means starting with truly seeing the people in front of you. Take a few moments and notice who's present. Look at people, recognize their aliveness. Y'all, I can't tell you the countless number of meetings and appointments and programs that I have attended in my life that have so neglected people's presence that I immediately checked out. And I know y'all are feeling me on this too, right? When this happens, people's minds go to other places. Like, why am I here? What is the point of this? What am I eating for dinner tonight? When does Thanksgiving vacation start? You know, or worst case scenario, they're online, like trying to buy something while you're talking during the meeting. And it's because they're thinking, I don't feel connected to this space, to this mission, to these people in this place. I started this evening, I tried by recognizing your aliveness and any needs that you might have by leading you in the guided meditation. Recognizing the presence of people and the fact that they have more going on than the program you're leading does not have to be grand to be impactful. Along with truly seeing people is truly knowing them. This requires curiosity. Be curious about the people you see at work and the people you lead and the people that you're friends with, you know, the people that you sit next to in class. Try to learn what people value and appreciate those values. Do a values inventory. There are lots online. Do a survey. Take people to lunch or coffee and ask, what matters to you? What are your deepest held values? Go on a retreat and sit in a small group and ask people to share stories that demonstrate what matters most to them. You can use a story prompt like, tell about a time when you did something that meant the world to you. What happened? I mean, we've lost sometimes the art of being curious about one another and asking, you know, things like this about like, what matters most to you? What are your deepest held values and why? It's difficult to say precisely how many people we can really know and thus feel connected to. There's different research on this. I'd encourage you to start small. If you lead a group, either now or in the future, if you lead a group of more than 15 people, I'd encourage you to have a number of leaders who spend part of their time learning, understanding, and appreciating the values of people in the organization. When I know that you know what I value and that you integrated it into the work that you invite me into our conversations, I know that I matter to you. And if I know that I matter to you and you value what I value, or at least value it enough to ask me about it, I'm going to feel, it's much more likely that I'm going to feel like I belong in the space that you're sharing with me. No matter what you do to intentionally work toward connecting with others, please don't underestimate the power of belonging. I'm a part of a group of scholars thinking about belonging, and it's a trans-institutional endeavor. So we all work at different kinds of organizations, which is really cool. Recently, we've been working on a paper about it, and one of my colleagues wrote these words, quote, "Like the air we breathe, belonging is also a matter of life and death." Another remarked, quote, "A healthy sense of belonging provides structure where individuals and communities are able to imagine what's possible, take chances, and give life to the next generation. When we exist in the bonds of others, giving and receiving belonging, we find ourselves offering our lives, our ideas, our gifts to the world." Finally, a collaborative community of prevention is marked by joy. Now, I've heard a lot that hope is the opposite of despair. Maybe some of you have heard that too. Hope is extremely potent and powerful. It's important. I love hope. I gotta have hope, okay? But theologian, he's a German theologian, Jürgen Moltmann, says this. He says, hope is the anticipation of joy. Hope is on its way to joy. Therefore, like my friend and theologian Willie James Jennings says, I think joy is a work of resistance against despair. Joy then is the ultimate counteragent to despair. Joy is the emotion that follows the recognition of and connection we feel to meaning, truth, beauty, goodness, one another. We can't manufacture joy. We can't make ourselves have the feeling of joy. We can't put it on our to-do list. We can't give ourselves the emotion, but we can posture ourselves toward joy. Like we can open ourselves to it. We can live expectantly. And we can invite other people in our community to do the same. And since joy is a virtue, there are questions we can ask that help people to cultivate meaning, truth, and goodness. And there are obstacles to joy and gateways to joy. I can't get into all of them tonight. I wish I could, but I am going to highlight a major obstacle to joy in a moment and a major gateway to joy. But before I do that, I just want to say again, because joy is the recognition of and connection we feel to meaning and truth and goodness, we can ask meaningful questions that help us to articulate more meaning and truth and goodness in our life. Okay, so questions like this. These are the kinds of conversations that we need to be having with each other, okay? Make myself a little bit smaller so that you can see. Okay, look at that, yes. All right, what is there to live for? What is worth wanting? And you can take a screenshot of this if you want. What do I feel, or what do I feel responsible to for living my life a certain way, and why? How should we act? What does it mean to lead our lives well? What should we hope for? What are the conditions of a good life? What does it mean for life to feel right? Do feelings even matter? Can I be sad, mad, fearful, and life still be good? How should you respond to suffering or pain? What is the role of suffering in a good life? What should you do when you fail? These kinds of questions are the kinds of questions that keep us awake at night. These get at the grit of life, at the most important things about, and this is the kind of stuff that Richard Rohr, that first quote that I was sharing at the beginning, we have this huge focus on STEM these days, which is amazing in many ways, right? It's been very, very helpful for particular kinds of human advancement. But the inner world of meaning has been ravaged I mean, in many ways, like it's been starved by people. So we need leaders like you, human beings like you, who are cultivating belonging, who are embodying empathy, and who are helping people to experience joy, to live more open to joy. And the way we get to joy is by having more meaning, like a connection to meaning and truth and goodness, articulating answers to questions like these. Now I'm going to talk through one obstacle to joy, and that is failure. And remember earlier I said that not only that one of the factors of suicidal ideation is this sense that maybe you have failed massively and you can't recover from it. This is why it's so important to tackle failure. And so it's very difficult to feel like my life is meaningful or beautiful or connected to others. And it's particularly difficult for me to feel like my life is good if I feel like a failure. Or if I feel like I've just like failed people around me, right? So we need collaborative communities that help people to navigate failure well. If we want to be communities of joy, we have to help people first remove this obstacle of failure, right? Failure happens in our lives. We have to expect it. It's not a matter of if you fail, but when you fail. When you fail, how will you handle it? We need to help people in our communities to understand and embrace the practices of faiths that help us to come back from failure. Things like the Christian practice of forgiveness or confession. Now, I'd like to highlight a gateway to joy too. There are ways of opening ourselves to joy. And one of them is celebrating the truth. Truth-telling, as ethicist Christine Pohl, she is there in Kentucky at Asbury Seminary, she defines truth-telling as affirming what is good and true in the world. Now, I began this practice of celebrating the truth in the prison with the women in the Bible study. And what I realized was, so one night, I put everybody into small groups and we had a flip chart paper, you know, those big pieces of paper that you can hang up on the walls, and everybody got into small groups. And I asked them, what do you have to give away while you're here in prison? Like, what do you have to share with others? And lots of things were noted by every group on their charts. And it was awesome. It was a beautiful conversation. But one thing that was highlighted by multiple groups was, we have our words. We still have our words. And we realize, wow, prison can take away a lot of things from us, but it can't take away our words. And so we began to use them as often as possible, right? We said, if we have the power of words, like, why don't we speak affirming and good things over one another? And so one of the things that we would do is I would write different, what I call like liturgies, basically like little poems that we would read over one another. And so we were in a big circle every Wednesday night. We put a chair in the center of the circle, and everyone would take a seat in the chair and have the words read over them. And everyone had a chance to stand up and to read the words over someone else in the circle. And one night the words were this: you are a child of God. You are beautiful. You are smart. Your life has purpose, right? And so every single woman was speaking these powerful words, like these truthful words over one another, and everyone had these words spoken over them. And then we created a reintegration ritual too. And we did a similar thing where we celebrated the truth over one another. Whenever someone was about to leave prison, they would let the group know. They'd be like, hey, Monday I'm going to court and I won't be here next Wednesday because I'm going to get out. And you're like, oh, awesome. And we would first just celebrate the fact that they get to leave prison. But then we would celebrate the truth over them we would put them in the center of the circle on a chair. And I would read this reintegration, or one of the team members, we would read these words, and it was our reintegration ritual. And we would say, may the peace of the Lord Jesus Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness, protect you through the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May he grant you vision to see yourself as a new creation. May he give you strength to take up new habits. May he grant you mercy and surround you with people who believe in you. May he provide all that you need to flourish as a human being. May he help you to feel loved during both difficult and joyful moments. We pray we will see you again in this life, but not in this room. And as a professor at Baylor University, I started to do this ritual of celebrating the truth, this practice, this gateway to joy at the end of my classes. And so I would write liturgies for students. And so I would basically in the last week of class, I would just think back over the semester and I'm like, okay, what do these students need to hear? What are the words that we need to affirm in one another? What's the goodness we need to affirm in one another? And I would write something out. And in my last class, that I taught at Baylor, this meaning of life, this life worth living course I was teaching there. It was, it was a Tuesday. The class was ending on a Thursday, and I thought, okay, it's time. I'm going to write this liturgy out, and so I wrote it on a Tuesday, and then that Thursday, all the students came to my house. They always came to my house for the very last class. We sat in a massive circle. There were 22 of us, and I put a chair after we did gratitudes. Everyone commended their visions of the life worth living to one another in like 200 words. We put a chair in the center of the room, and then everyone got to have the words read over them and to read the words to someone else. And the very last student who had read her vision of a life worth living, a meaningful life to everyone, she started it by saying, at the beginning of this semester, I didn't know if my life was worth living. I didn't know if it mattered. But now I believe it matters because. And so when I decided to do I was just so shocked to hear exactly what she said. And then I called on her and I said, hey, will you come sit in the circle first, in the center first? And then I read these words over her. I said her name, and then I said the words that I had written 2 days before. Your life matters to God and to us. You are free to live by the Spirit, to live as if you matter, free to live into your gifts, free to be yourself. You are free to love deeply, to speak the truth, to be on the side of the poor and the oppressed, to rebel against dehumanization, to surrender to God's will. You are free to love your enemies, to be brave and to forgive, and to be a peace builder. You are free to live a life worthy of your humanity. Celebrating the truth, affirming what's good and true about one another is a gateway to joy because it helps us to recognize and to feel connected to meaning, to truth, to beauty and goodness in our own lives, and to feel connected to one another. And that brings us unspeakable joy. To recap, we are in desperate need of you. We are in desperate need of collaborative communities of prevention. Specifically, we are in desperate need of collaborative communities of prevention that are marked by empathy, belonging, and joy. These are the things that prevent the spread of our most contagious illnesses of the soul. And if you forget basically everything that I've said tonight, I hope that you'll remember this. Every single day, every day, you have the opportunity to look others in the eyes and to tell them that they matter to you. I hope that you will say it as often as you can. It is more difficult to lose my sense of self or to determine that my life is ineffective or burdensome if I'm a part of a community that regularly tells me that I matter to them. So let's totally exhaust it. Just wear it out. I hope your roommates, your friends, your family, the people you see at the grocery, the grocery clerk that you see every week, whoever, I hope you wear it out. And I hope that people are exhausted by it. And they're like, I know, I get it. I matter to you. As a leader, as a professor, a student, a staff member, a human, say it as often as possible. Look at the people around you and tell them how much they matter to you. In my own way, I'd like to do that for you tonight, to end where I began. You may be experiencing the weight of the world this evening, but since you are sitting here, still breathing, your story is still being written. Your life matters. It matters to me. If you're willing and able, I invite you to please open your hands and to receive these words from William Blake Coffin. Wherever you are, just to open your hands and receive these words. May God give you the grace never to sell yourself short. Grace to risk something big for something good. And grace to remember the world is now too dangerous for anything but the truth and too small for anything but love. Thank you.
Yeah, whoa, that was incredible. I feel so much lighter and free. So thanks for that time. And literally one of the students in the room said slay. So that means it's such a great job. That's right.
I received that.
I receive it. So I wonder now, as we're kind of collecting ourselves for all those who are participating with us online, if you have some questions that you want to chime in, if so, do me a favor, utilize the chat box, put those in, because I know trying to unmute and mute and all that kind of stuff can be really complicated. So as questions, someone want to chime in with a question, I'll start us.
Yeah. Also, could I say too, I think we welcome, as long as you're okay with it, we also welcome illuminations or insights like, hey, you know what? This really struck me tonight. This was important for me. So in the chat, if something you were like, this is what I'm taking home with me. I'm challenged by this. This is going to stick with me. I want to keep thinking about this. We welcome your illuminations, your insights, and any questions that you have.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Something you said that I really have been wrestling a lot with, and it's this idea of, as a culture, we don't fail well, and
yeah.
Particularly, I think in my own experience in my faith, right, there's not much space for failure inside of, at least in kind of my brand of being brought up evangelical, right? It's only success and perfection and blah, blah, blah. And I know you talked about the rights of like forgiveness and things like that, but I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more, and maybe even, do you think that Jesus experienced failure? I mean, I don't know if we've got like great theological question, right? But like, I just think that because we don't see it in some of our models, right? We're all like, well, if I fail, then my life doesn't matter, it's meaningless, and yada, yada, yada. So I wonder about that. Any further kind of conversation about failing well or seeing failure in other kind of, even Jesus,
Yeah. What I see in the life and ministry of Jesus in particular is that there was always, like, if I was going to, give Jesus words that he never said, I would say what I hear him saying in so many conversations is, I'm rooting for you. Like that, no matter what has happened, you can recover. And so it's like, I feel like if I'm going to talk about like failing well is really about having communities with leaders of them that say, hey, when we make mistakes, like we use that kind of language, when we make mistakes, when we fail each other, when we fail to live the life that we hoped we would, we will do blah, blah, blah. We will recover in this way. And just say, similar to belonging, like I was saying, we just need to talk about it more. I think it's really about creating conversation around failure that says like, hey, I just want you to know that even if you mess up, like even if you fail, if you make a mistake, if this happened, like, I'm in your corner and I'm going to help you to recover yourself, to find yourself again, to find your sense of direction again, to, to forgive yourself, to learn from this, to walk away, to offer this to God, to let it go, to surrender it, whatever, all kinds of language around release. I think that that's the thing, is that just we do things sometimes, we fail ourselves, we fail others, and then we just carry it forever. We don't know how to let it go. And that is what like religious traditions, like this is an offering that it gives us, specifically the Christian tradition, which is mine. That's why I'm speaking from tonight. But is that it gives us this ability, like, hey, I can let this go. I can surrender it, and I think, so it's more conversation about it. It's an invitations to surrender. And it's really just saying to people again and again, when this happens, no, I'm still in your corner. I'm still going to, like, let's work through it together. You're not alone in this, Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. I know in the midst of our chat, a lot of people lifting up points of illumination. There was one question about, let me see if I'm going to read this correctly. In respect, I believe in respect and kindness, but I'm challenged by the incredibly polarized environment we're in, which social media seems to amplify. Is it possible to rise above those forces and focus on our common humanity? How to say to each other that you matter when there's so much of us and them? And that's kind of I guess, another point of illumination, the real challenge to do that. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where I don't want to just go back to the lecture, and yet I'm going to just go back to the lecture because I really do. The thing is that I believe that breaking down the barriers does start with something like empathy. And empathy, like I said, a good place to start is lament. And what are the aches in your life? And if people, even if you have if you disagree on a number of political issues, when people know that you're interested in what has broken their heart or what they're aching for in their life, like they're going to, all of a sudden, that's going to like start to crumble the wall a little bit. And so I think it's about, polarization is about, first, it's starting with, what has broken your heart? Like, how do I, so what are you going through in your life? That's another way of saying, right? What have you gone through in your life? What are you lamenting? Like, what are you mourning in your, what's been stressful for you? What's been heavy on your heart? What weighs down on you? What keeps you awake at night? So all I think a lot of what, like, polarization, what it really needs, the opposite, I think what really resists polarization, if what really resists despair is joy, what really resists polarization is curiosity. And so curiosity about laments and about the grief that people are experiencing. If I know you care about the things that I'm going through, if I know, even if it is to say, hey, that sucks. Like, I hate that happened to you. Like that, to the grocery clerk that you say, hey, how's your week been going? Like, has anything bad been going on? Anything good happened? Well, actually, something really terrible happened. This happened to me the other day. Oh my gosh, that's awful. That sucks. Like, that's a punch in the gut. And they're like, oh, thanks. Yeah, I lament with you about that. Like, I mourn with you about that, and then being curious about the belonging thing. Do you feel like you belong at this school? Like, do you feel like you belong on this team? Like, do you feel like you belong in our friendship circle? Like, what do you think belonging is? Like, more, curiosity about people's sense of belonging. I think we assume a lot about belonging, and then so many people are not feeling it, a quality of it, and then curiosity again with the joy stuff about what brings meaning to people's lives, to all of our lives. And I think this, for me, my practice on social media that has been wildly helpful to me in the last few years is every single time I get online, I look for somebody to rejoice with and somebody to mourn with. And I'm talking about in a really intentional way. Like, I get on and I'm like, who can I celebrate with today? And I'm scrolling through my news feed on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, right? And I'm looking at and I'm going, oh, this great thing happened to this person that they just shared. And then I try to reply to them. I DM them. If I know them well, I text them, hey, I saw you put on your post this, like, you got a new job. Like, I literally did it with one of my former students the other day. I saw that she got a new job in Boston. And so I texted her, hey, I'm so proud of you. I'm so stoked for you. That community is going to be so lucky to get you. That's it. It takes 5 seconds of my day, but like, my focus on media then is not on myself and like, how do I make sure everyone likes me in the world, right? My focus is who do I celebrate with? And then, I'm telling you, it makes social media a lot more palatable. And then who do I lament with? Like, who needs to know, who needs like to be lifted up today? Who needs to know, like, hey, I'm thinking about you. And not just you know, the sort of like not just the emojis, right? If somebody posts something that's deeply sad in their life, a DM to them goes a long way. You know, just like, hey, this is the prayer that I prayed for you. Hey, I just wanted you to know that that's really hard. Or a reply that says underneath, you know, this is really heartbreaking. That just acknowledges, like, I see the pain that you're in and I'm a witness. That's really what we all want in life. When it comes to our celebrations and our laments, is we just want somebody to be a witness, you know? And so for me, that's been a helpful thing in social media spaces for not being focused on polarization and on, you know, it's been a helpful focus. I hope that. So I encourage you, try to have some practices, like, what can I do online that will make me, you know, less angry? And also, when you get angry online, just get off and do something else, because it's so unproductive at times. All right.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. Any other questions that we have? Other comments that people want to lift up?
Thank you all so much. I'm reading all of your messages on your illuminations, the fact that you needed to hear these messages. Thank you so much. Something that you needed. All of you, thank you. Thank you for what you said. I read every single one of it, all of your comments. Thank you.
Well, in hearing no other questions, I know you've given us a lot to receive and to give. I really appreciate it. I feel like this has been a real gift to me personally, and also to our campus. Your words are so much more timely than you realize. In the last week, we've had really a difficult loss for many of our students on campus. And for some of us, we were just at a funeral today.
Oh, wow.
So your words are really timely. Thanks for listening to the Spirit and doing all that hard work. And one of the things, I guess, I want to close with, just really struck me, is how I'm so grateful for the space. Is I can tell that you've done such hard inner work to kind of, you know, to kind of bring up the space to even be present with people. I feel like that comes when you do a lot of inner hard work, and you've just done it for our community. So thanks for being willing to do that and then share it with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I just, I want to, say thank you so much for those words. I want to say to everyone who was at the funeral today, I do lament with you, I mourn with you that you've had a loss this week that's been really difficult and is weighing heavy on you tonight. And I wanted to speak to Nathan. Nathan, you asked a question about finding joy in isolation, and there are other gateways to joy. One of them is gratitude. And for me, it's become a very, you know, a gratitude list are generally what people tell you to do. But for me, I downloaded an app called Insight Timer. It's totally free. And it has it has guided meditations from people around the world, from all different kinds of religious traditions. And so whichever one is your religious tradition, you can find people that are leading meditations from that particular perspective, or even like more humanistic, you know, other philosophical traditions. And several of the meditations that I do one every single morning. And it's like totally changed my life in the last 2.5 years. And usually they're 8 to 10 minutes long. But all of my favorite ones just have me start my day with gratitude. And it's like, it will invite me, like, what's one thing that you're grateful for this morning? Maybe it's the way that the sun like shines into the window as you're sitting here. Maybe it's the dawn before the beginning of the day. Maybe it's the dark of night and the full moon, you know. Maybe it is the laughter of your niece or nephew, or whatever it is. Like, it can be really small, or like the warmth of the coffee that you're holding in your hand. And starting with my day with just even like one thing to be grateful for has really, it shifts your whole perspective on your day, right? I think of joy as a flashlight in your hand. Like, you're looking for it in life. You're looking for meaning. You're looking for truth. You're looking for goodness. And more than that, beauty and connection. And more than that, like, you're assuming that it's going to find you. you're assuming that you're going to stumble onto it. We often find what we're looking for. You know, another gateway to joy then is hope. That's what, so right. So Maltman was saying, hope is the anticipation of joy. A couple of Sundays ago, I got a big piece of poster board and created a vision board with markers. Like I was, 10 years old again. It was awesome. And I literally drew all these pictures and all these words of all of my hopes for the next 2 years of my life. I'll be 40 in a few weeks. And I thought, as I enter this new decade, what's my vision board for the next couple of years, right? And it filled me with joy to anticipate all of this beauty or goodness or meaning that like could come from my work, from my relationships and stuff. And so that's just 2 things that I would suggest to you tonight, that even in isolation, creating a vision board of your hopes, starting with like gratitude meditation in the morning using an app like Insight Timer, which is totally free. These can be things that open you to joy in your life. Thank you so much for everyone. For all the rest of your comments as well. Oh, yes, with Miroslav, yes, of course, yeah. Oh, wonderful, thank you. Yes, thank you all so much. Again, yes, and I appreciate what you just said. Joy, reiterating, joy is a work of resistance against despair. So this is our work together, and it's good work. It's not the bad kind of work. It's the good kind of work. Joy has grit. It is not naive. You don't betray your grief by allowing joy in. And you might feel lonely tonight, but you're not alone. Your life matters.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Blessings on these next steps and this next adventure. And we look forward to someday that green sign in Pikeville also saying in the birthplace of, or the home of Angela Gorrell. That we'll put that on I'll put that on my vision board for down the road.
Oh,
all right.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.